Medieval architecture. The story of a civilization written in stone. The Middle Ages were one of the longest and most complex periods in history. Often labeled as the Dark Ages, this description barely scratches the surface. When we look at the stones, cathedrals, castles, and bridges of that era, we see immense creativity, patience, and a profound search for meaning. Medieval architecture was not merely about structures built from stone. It was the tangible form of humanity's relationship with God, nature, and its own existence. Point 1. Historical background. After the fall of the Western Roman Empire in 476 AD, Europe entered a period of great transformation. The collapse of central authority disrupted economic and social structures. In this uncertain world, the need for security, the rise of religious power, and the dominance of the feudal system directly shaped architectural development. In the early Middle Ages, 6th-10th centuries, architecture focused mainly on defense and faith. Most people lived in villages, cities shrank, and production became local. As a result, buildings had to be simple, functional, and durable, characteristics that defined the Romanesque style. Point 2. The Romanesque period, the power of stone. The Romanesque style flourished from the 10th to the mid-12th century. Its name comes from its inspiration, Roman architecture. Builders of that era drew from the ruins of the ancient world. Thick walls, rounded arches, heavy stone vaults, and small windows became hallmarks of Romanesque design. This architecture embodied a sense of security and seclusion. Castles, monasteries, and churches were like sanctuaries. From the outside, they appeared dark and fortress-like. Inside, they were quiet, serene, and minimal. Light was scarce due to small windows. Large openings would compromise structural integrity, but that limited light carried deep symbolic meaning. These structures reflected the human desire to retreat from the world and turn inward. Romanesque churches were typically built in the shape of a Latin cross, with a main nave, side chapels, and an apse housing the altar. The use of stone vaults gave the buildings both weight and durability, though it restricted height, resulting in a horizontal, grounded aesthetic. One of the best examples of this style is the Abbey Church of Saint-Foy in France, an important stop along the pilgrimage route to Santiago de Compostela. Similarly, Speyer Cathedral in Germany and Pisa Cathedral in Italy embody the same spirit. The Romanesque era was an age of stone and patience. Builders rarely signed their work. Their creations were offerings to God, not paths to fame. Each carved block became part of a collective memory, bearing the marks of both fear and faith. Point 3. The Gothic period, the architecture of light. From the mid-12th century onward, Europe began to change dramatically. Populations grew, trade flourished, and cities revived. Churches became not only places of worship, but also centers of learning and culture. Architecture evolved. Stone still ruled, but it now carried light instead of darkness. The new style was called Gothic. Initially, the term was used derogatorily. During the Renaissance, it was associated with the barbarian Goths. In reality, Gothic architecture represented the peak of medieval artistic achievement. Its defining innovations were the pointed arch and the flying buttress. These features distributed structural weight outward, allowing walls to become thinner and windows larger. Light flooded the interiors. Cathedrals rose higher, reaching toward the heavens and dominating city skylines. Stained glass became the soul of Gothic architecture. Beyond decoration, it served an educational purpose. The illiterate masses learned biblical stories through the colorful scenes. Sunlight streaming through the glass created a sacred, almost ethereal atmosphere. Masterpieces like Chartres Cathedral, Reims Cathedral, Amiens Cathedral, and Notre Dame de Paris showcase this aesthetic. Stone seemed to be transformed into lace. Intricate carvings, sculptures, and reliefs all symbolized humanity's yearning to ascend toward the divine. But Gothic architecture was not solely about faith. It was also a reflection of social structure. As cities prospered, guilds, groups of skilled artisans, funded and built cathedrals. Masons, glassmakers, carpenters, and metalworkers collaborated for generations. Some cathedrals took over a century to complete. A master might die before seeing his work finished, passing it down to his son. These were monuments to collective human effort. Point 4. Castles and military architecture. Another defining image of the Middle Ages is the castle, both a fortress and a symbol of feudal power. Every lord had his own, serving as both residence and stronghold. Early fortifications were simple wooden structures on mounds, motte and bailey, but over time, stone replaced wood. Typical castles included outer walls, courtyards, towers, drawbridges, moats, and inner keeps, donjons. Towers provided defense and surveillance, while narrow arrow slits and braziers offered protection in battle. Yet castles were more than military bases. They were self-sufficient mini-societies. Within their walls were kitchens, stables, workshops, and living quarters. Notable examples include Windsor Castle in England and Carcassonne in France. Castle architecture mirrored medieval anxieties, the fear of invasion and the longing for safety, but also expressed authority and prestige. Every stone was a declaration of power. Point 5. Monasteries, the architecture of silence. Medieval religious life extended beyond grand cathedrals. Monasteries built far from cities and close to nature reflected the spiritual ideals of isolation and contemplation. A monastery typically included a church, refectory, dining hall, dormitory, cloister, and library. The layouts were simple yet ordered, embodying a spiritual desire for balance and discipline. Monastic orders like the Benedictines, Cistercians, and Carthusians promoted simplicity in architecture. Ornamentation, they believed, distracted the soul. Cluny Abbey and Fontenay Abbey in France exemplify this aesthetic, spaces of quiet devotion where stone became a medium for silence itself. Point 6. Bridges, city gates, and civic architecture. Medieval architecture wasn't limited to religious and defensive buildings. As trade expanded, civic structures gained prominence. Market squares, guild halls, bridges, and inns. Stone bridges became both practical and symbolic, linking communities and enhancing commerce. The Pont Valentré in France and the Ponte Vecchio in Italy stand as engineering marvels of their time. City gates and walls also evolved, marking boundaries and serving as protective emblems. Houses were often built from a mix of wood and stone, with upper floors jutting over narrow, shaded streets. Many served dual purposes as both homes and workshops. Some of these still survive in Europe's historic towns today. 7. The builders and the craft. Looking at medieval cathedrals today, one can't help but wonder how they were built without modern machines. Everything relied on human labor, rudimentary cranes, ropes, and wooden scaffolding. A cathedral could take decades, even centuries, to complete. The architect was often a scholar or cleric, designing according to sacred geometry, astronomical symbols, and divine proportions. Architecture was seen as an act of prayer as much as a technical craft. Workers were organized into guilds, each with its own symbols and rituals, traditions that would later inspire Freemasonry. Stonemasons dedicated their lives to these projects, carving their silent signatures into hidden corners as humble testaments to their craft. Point 8. East and West, cultural exchange. Medieval architecture was not confined to Europe alone. The Crusades, trade, and contact with the Islamic world fostered profound cultural exchange. In regions like Spain and Sicily, Romanesque, Gothic, and Islamic elements merged. The Alhambra in Granada and the Palatine Chapel in Palermo exemplify this fusion, featuring Arabic arches, geometric motifs, and mosaics interwoven with Western forms. Such structures reveal that the Middle Ages were far from isolated. They were deeply interconnected. Point 9. The dawn of the Renaissance, when stone learned a new language. By the late 15th century, Gothic grandeur gave way to a new mindset. Humanity began to trust reason as much as faith. Renaissance architecture emerged, emphasizing proportion, symmetry, and a return to classical ideals. Yet the Middle Ages never truly vanished. Across Europe, the imprint of that era remains. In every cathedral shadow, every stone bridge, every fortress wall. Those stones are more than structures. They are the embodiment of a civilization's soul. Point 10. Conclusion: the memory of stone. Medieval architecture is one of the foundations of the modern world. Its structures speak not only of technical skill, but of spiritual, psychological, and social depth. Each building contains the hopes, fears, and faith of its people. The heavy stones of the Romanesque teach patience. The soaring arches of the Gothic teach aspiration. Castles embody protection, monasteries serenity, and bridges connection. When we stand before these monuments today, we can still sense the hands that built them, the prayers whispered among their walls, and the world that gave them meaning. Architecture is the voice of an age, and in the Middle Ages, that voice was carved in stone. Stone became memory, and the Middle Ages were the era that spoke it best.